Jesus makes many promises about prayer throughout the Gospels. An example is in John 14 when he says, "If you ask anything in my name, I'll do it." Why would Jesus make such a statement if it's not true for us 100% of the time? Can Jesus be trusted?
Jesus can be trusted, but he can be trusted on his terms, not ours. And he can be trusted when you understand what he's getting at. And I would here reiterate the point about hyperbole, stating things with an exclamation point by stating them in unqualified terms, and in some cases in exaggerated terms. So he's stressing how important it is to ask him things in his name, in his authority, to align your hearts with the kingdom. But that's not a magical formula verse, because there are other passages that qualify it. For example, if you have faith and if you pray numbers and all those other sorts of things. Plus, it's something we all know intuitively. I mean, common sense. There was a girl I met one time at a YWAM conference, and she was objecting to something I said. I gave a talk that was something along these lines, and she insisted that on that verse, Jesus says, "Anything I ask, it will be given to me," and so it's lack of faith not to believe that. And I said, "Well, has that been your experience? Everything you've asked has been given to you?" And she says, "Yes, every prayer has been answered." I go, "Really?" And I was trying to be really nice, but I know she's not being honest. I mean, so I just said, "Well, please pray for peace in the Middle East by midnight tonight." Honestly. Because on some level, you know that there are other variables. Like, okay, I don't know what she would say on that. The conversation didn't go on very long after that. But we all know that there's other variables. Because peace in the Middle East depends somewhat on the free decisions of the people that are involved there, and a multitude of other variables. But it is emphatically important to pray in Jesus' name, and in accordance with God's will, and persistently, and passionately, and with faith, and for the person to have faith, and to have angels on your side, and resist forces of evil, and all the other variables we've talked about.
I think you and I had an education on why Jesus talked that way when we were doing the Jesus Legend book. It's really a struggle for us in a post-Gutenberg printing press, highly literate world to understand why verbal dynamics work the way they do in ancient cultures. But here's part of the insight we've got to remember. We have access to at least most of us, anyone who's literate in our culture has access to texts where when someone teaches something, or we can make a DVD out of it, or a CD, or write it down in notes, or have it printed up in a booklet, it's there for us. It's there for us forever, and we can go ahead and forget it because we can always go back and look at it again. In a culture where there's no DVDs, CDs, and where most of the people in that culture, nearest estimates we can tell, is probably 5 to 15% of people in the ancient Near East were literate. That means most of the people Jesus knows he's talking to every day have one shot at remembering what he's going to say, and the only way to remember it is the way he says it. And so how people communicate in those cultures is they say things that will be indelibly imprinted upon a human memory, because there's no text to go back to or CD to listen to again. And so they'll say things that, quite frankly, sound exaggerated or absurd. The whole culture knowing that's the memory technique by which you lodge things in people's minds. So this is why Jesus constantly uses in his teachings things that are graphically illustrated. And you can think over and over, he uses metaphors. I'm the bread of life. I'm the living water bubbling out of, it's all things that you can get a picture.
Drink my blood, eat
I'll
my
never forget
body.
that again. And if you say something like, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your right eye causes you sin, pluck it out. Boy, you imagine that for a minute, and you know the power. Now, he didn't literally mean that. What he meant was, anything in your life that is causing you to sin, rip it out. But of course, we know it's not physical body parts that cause us to sin, it's spiritual stuff. But he uses this language to help a largely non-literate culture remember his teachings, because tomorrow he's going to the next village, and there's no notes laying around, and they have one shot at remembering what it was he said. So you say things in very emphatic, hyperbolic ways. Pray with faith, and you'll get what you want. Okay, now I'll remember. That's a strong. I'll never forget that. But I've got to remember everything else he said. There was also the variables involved. So it's about an oral culture, and we're so different in this culture.